Imagine a Senate hearing where 20 high-profile names linked to Jeffrey Epstein are revealed live on record. The FBI director thought he could handle it, but one question changes everything. In just 8 minutes, a career is shattered. Stay tuned, because what happens next is historic. The Senate Hart building was unusually tense that morning. A routine congressional hearing on oversight had transformed into something no one in attendance expected. Congressman Thomas Massie stepped to the podium with meticulous preparation. A folder of verified documents in hand, and an unwavering gaze that made it clear he was not there for a ceremonial session. The target of his inquiry, FBI Director Kash Patel, whose credibility and career now hung in the balance. The hearing began under standard protocol. Patel, confident in his position and accustomed to public scrutiny, prepared to answer questions with rehearsed precision. The expectation for many in the room was that this would be another controlled display of bureaucratic procedure officials defending their agency. Congress performing its oversight function. But Massie had a different plan. Emily Carter, an observer in the gallery, felt the charged atmosphere immediately. Massie's methodical approach exuded confidence, but more importantly, he held information that could not be dismissed. For weeks, he had cross-referenced Epstein-related client files, FBI documentation, and victim statements, verifying every detail before the hearing. His objective was clear: to hold the FBI accountable for years of negligence and inaction. Massie began by stating, calmly but firmly, "I want to discuss the FBI's handling of Jeffrey Epstein's client files." The room seemed to hold its collective breath. Cameras rolled, capturing every reaction. Patel adjusted in his seat, maintaining a veneer of composure. Bondi's absence meant Patel stood alone, and the focus was entirely on his responses. Massie's approach was strategic. He didn't immediately list names. Instead, he framed the context years of victim reports ignored. Detailed Form 302 documents left uninvestigated, and the implications for public trust and international relations. The gravity of the issue slowly became apparent to everyone watching, including those live streaming across the country. Then came the moment that would define the hearing. Massie began naming individuals from Epstein's client files. "The FBI has detailed documentation regarding 20 individuals," he said. One by one, he listed them. Jess Staley, CEO of Barclays Bank, a Hollywood producer, a royal prince, a rock star, a prominent banker, a high-profile government official, and 6 billionaires, including one Canadian magnate. Each name was precise, verified, and on record. Patel's demeanor shifted subtly. The rehearsed statements, the prepared talking points, all seemed inadequate under Massie's direct, evidence-backed presentation. His face remained neutral, but Emily could see the tension in his hands and jaw. Each name Massie pronounced added weight to the implications. The FBI had ignored years of victim statements, despite detailed documentation. And now the Oversight Committee and the public knew the scale of inaction. The cameras captured every nuance for millions of viewers. The hearing had morphed from a bureaucratic formality into a dramatic exposition of institutional failure. Massie's systematic approach left little room for evasion, forcing Patel to confront not only the facts, but the public perception of his leadership and judgment. "Director Patel," Massie asked next, "are you aware of these files and the failure to act on credible victim statements for years?" Patel's usual confidence faltered. He paused, searching for a safe answer, but the gravity of the documented evidence left him little room to maneuver. The committee waited, cameras focused, as he finally responded, "I don't know." The simplicity of the statement, so brief yet monumental, resonated through the chamber. Emily sensed the shift immediately. The FBI director's career, carefully built over years, now faced an unprecedented public reckoning in just 8 minutes. The gallery whispered, journalists typed feverishly. and the live broadcast amplified every reaction. Massie continued methodically, emphasizing the implications of each uninvestigated report. CIA connections, overlooked royal ties, financial misconduct, and the failures to prioritize victim testimony. Each piece of evidence, each name listed, created a narrative of negligence and inaction that could not be ignored. By the end of the first 8 minutes, it was clear that the session had surpassed standard oversight. Patel's admission of "I don't know" was more than an answer, was a symbolic moment, signaling a breakdown in leadership and oversight at the highest level. The public watching understood the stakes, and committee members leaned in. Absorbing the gravity of the situation, Emily reflected on the scene. What Massie had orchestrated was not a spectacle. It was meticulous preparation, strategic questioning, and the pursuit of accountability. The hearing was unfolding as a historic confrontation between institutional power and legislative oversight, with consequences that would ripple across agencies, governments, and even international relations. The stage was set for Part 2, further revelations, deeper analysis, and the continuing unraveling of Patel's career under the unrelenting scrutiny of Thomas Massie's systematic approach. The hearing room had grown tense. Each passing moment amplified the stakes as Massie methodically presented evidence of the FBI's long-standing failures regarding Jeffrey Epstein's client files. Director Kash Patel, seated at the center, tried to maintain composure. But the weight of the meticulously verified documentation was undeniable. Emily Carter, observing from the gallery, noted the subtle shifts in Patel's demeanor. His hands gripped the table, jaw tightened, and the rehearsed narrative that had served him well in countless prior hearings began to unravel. Massie didn't rely on theatrics. His approach was precise, evidence-driven, and deliberate. The naming of the 20 Epstein clients had been only the opening salvo. Massie now began explaining the context. 6 billionaires, a royal prince, a Hollywood producer, high-profile government officials, and industry leaders, all linked to uninvestigated allegations and detailed Form 302 documentation. The evidence suggested years of negligence, mismanagement, and failure to act on credible victim reports. Patel attempted a cautious defense. "Congressman, the Bureau has protocols in place to review all files and respond appropriately. Some delays were administrative, and every case was considered within the context of operational priorities." Massie's response was calm but piercing. "Director Patel, these are not minor administrative delays." Detailed victim statements were ignored for years, despite documented evidence of misconduct. How do you reconcile this with the FBI's public claims of accountability? Bondi was absent, and Patel was forced to respond alone. He faltered, offering vague statements, phrases of compliance, and references to procedures. Yet every word seemed inadequate. Massie's evidence-based strategy left no room for evasion, highlighting contradictions and exposing failures to both the committee and the millions watching via live broadcast. The most damning moment arrived when Massie presented the recorded timeline of actions were inactions by the FBI. Each segment showed clear awareness of the allegations, discussions about potential investigations, and decisions that deprioritized victim testimony. Emily watched intently as committee members leaned forward, absorbing the cumulative evidence. The narrative was stark. Systemic oversight failures and negligence at the highest level. Patel's previous confidence was now visibly eroded. Each question forced him to confront documented failures and public perception simultaneously. "Director, are you personally aware of the mishandling of these cases?" Massie asked. Patel hesitated, searching for words that would satisfy both the committee and his own legal exposure. Finally, he uttered what would become the career-defining moment. "I don't know." The gallery gasped subtly, reporters typed furiously, and cameras captured every reaction. That simple phrase, under the intense scrutiny of evidence and live broadcast, conveyed more than uncertainty, signaled leadership breakdown. The FBI director responsible for ensuring integrity and accountability had publicly admitted ignorance regarding critical failures in high-profile investigations. Massie continued systematically, emphasizing the broader implications. The victims reported abuse years ago. Some of the clients named include a royal prince, 6 billionaires, and other influential figures. Yet the FBI failed to act. Director Patel, how does this align with your commitment to justice? Patel attempted to regain composure, offering bureaucratic statements about internal reviews and procedural oversight. But every sentence clashed with the overwhelming evidence Massie presented: emails, reports, and chronological documentation that left no room for ambiguity. Emily Carter noted the strategic genius of Massie's approach. He was not relying on sensationalism or theatrics. Instead, he combined verified evidence, precise questioning, and methodical pacing to systematically dismantle Patel's credibility in real time. The impact extended beyond the hearing room. International media outlets were already broadcasting highlights: the admission of "I don't know" by the FBI director, the revelation of names, and the acknowledgement of ignored victim statements. The ramifications were immediate, with global attention highlighting both the scale of the failures and the unprecedented nature of congressional oversight in this instance. Massie paused briefly, letting the evidence sink in. The audience, both in person and virtual, understood the magnitude. This was not routine oversight, but a historic exposure of systemic negligence and accountability failures. By the end of Part 2, Patel's career trajectory was unmistakably altered. The precise, evidence-backed strategy employed by Massie left him exposed, vulnerable, and struggling to respond coherently. Emily reflected on the gravity of the session: a carefully orchestrated confrontation, executed with professionalism, preparation, and strategic clarity, had reshaped the narrative around leadership, responsibility, and institutional integrity. The stage was now set for Part 3: deeper analysis, public and congressional reactions, and the unraveling of Patel's career under relentless scrutiny. The tension in the Senate, heart-building, had reached an almost tangible level. Every observer, from committee members to journalists in the gallery, understood that this was far from a standard oversight hearing. The systematic naming of 20 Epstein clients by Congressman Thomas Massie had exposed a vulnerability in FBI leadership that no rehearsed talking point could cover. Director Kash Patel, seated at the center, faced the cumulative weight of the evidence. Emails formed 302 reports, and detailed documentation of inaction had stripped away the veneer of control he normally projected. Bondi's absence intensified the pressure. Patel now bore the full brunt of congressional scrutiny. Emily Carter, serving quietly, noted how Massie maintained an unrelenting calm. His strategy was deliberate: methodically highlight the names, associate them with ignored victim statements, and demonstrate the institutional negligence in a way that was undeniable to both the committee and the public. As Massie continued, he emphasized the broader pattern. These individuals include a royal prince, 6 billionaires, prominent bankers, a Hollywood producer, and a rock star, he stated, each name delivered with precise documentation. Yet the FBI, under your direction, did not act. Victims' voices were dismissed. Evidence was ignored. How do you justify this? Patel's responses became increasingly strained. He attempted bureaucratic explanations, phrases about internal reviews, and references to operational priorities. Each response, however, clashed directly with the clear, verified evidence Massie presented. The live broadcast ensured that millions understood the full scope. Leadership failure at the highest level. Emily noticed subtle cues from the committee members. Some took detailed notes, others exchanged concerned glances. The evidence was so comprehensive and undeniable that any attempt at deflection would appear transparent to those watching. Patel's usual confidence had eroded into visible discomfort. Massie then turned to the recordings. One by one, the audience heard conversations that revealed internal discussions about ignoring victim statements and deprioritizing investigations. Bondi's absence was notable. Without her to intervene, Patel was left exposed, forced to answer for actions and decisions that had been coordinated over months. Director Patel Massie asked, voice steady, "Are you personally aware of these specific cases and the failures to investigate?" Patel hesitated, scanning the room. His response was brief but monumental. "I don't know." The simplicity of the answer belied its gravity. In just 2 words, Patel conveyed more than uncertainty. He signaled an institutional failure and personal inability to account for significant lapses under his leadership. Cameras captured the moment, and the gallery reacted subtly, though the full implications were clear to anyone following the evidence. Massie pressed on, systematically breaking down the consequences of inaction. He highlighted international implications, such as the royal prince's involvement and the global financial repercussions tied to the 6 billionaires named. The audience understood that this was not merely about oversight, it was about accountability, justice, and the integrity of federal institutions. Patel's attempts to regain composure became increasingly transparent. Each statement clashed with the documented evidence. The committee watched as the FBI director struggled to respond coherently, his authority eroding with every passing minute. Emily reflected on the wider significance. The hearing demonstrated that meticulous preparation, precise questioning, and evidence-based confrontation could dismantle even the most entrenched defenses. The exposure was both factual and symbolic. The public could see that even high-ranking officials were not immune to accountability. Massie's strategic pacing intensified the impact. He allowed the gravity of each revelation to settle, then followed with additional context, victim statements ignored, critical documents unreviewed, and systemic oversight failures. The cumulative effect left Patel vulnerable, both publicly and within the committee's formal proceedings. As the final minutes of Part 3 approached, Patel's career trajectory had shifted irrevocably. His credibility, leadership, and decision-making authority were now under public scrutiny, with little chance of recovery. Emily observed how the carefully structured hearing had achieved a dual purpose: exposing institutional failures and illustrating the power of diligent, methodical oversight. By the end of this part, it was evident that the consequences for Patel extended beyond political embarrassment. The systematic exposure of negligence and the strategic dismantling of his defense had set the stage for permanent professional repercussions. Public trust, agency accountability, and leadership credibility had all been severely impacted. The stage was now set for Part 4, the final unraveling, global reactions, and the aftermath that would cement this hearing as a defining moment in congressional oversight and institutional accountability. The Senate hearing room was now fully charged with tension. Every eye, from committee members to journalists in the gallery, focused intently on Director Kash Patel, whose earlier composure had begun to crumble under the weight of the evidence presented by Congressman Thomas Massie. The systematic naming of 20 Epstein clients had already shaken the room. But what followed would seal the FBI director's fate. Emily Carter, serving quietly, could sense the historical gravity. This was not just about oversight. It was about accountability at the highest level. The list of individuals including a royal prince, 6 billionaires, prominent bankers, a Hollywood producer, and a rock star combined with years of ignored victim statements made the situation unprecedented. The FBI director, responsible for managing investigations and ensuring justice, now faced exposure in real time before the nation. Massie continued calmly but forcefully, breaking down the implications of the FBI's inaction. Each client named represented not only potential criminal activity, but also a failure to protect victims and uphold justice. Internal documentation and Form 302 reports clearly showed that these cases had been deprioritized, dismissed, or ignored entirely. Patel's responses were increasingly cautious. He attempted bureaucratic explanations, administrative backlogs, procedural review processes, and operational priorities. Yet every statement clashed with the clearly documented timeline Massie had prepared. The live broadcast amplified every nuance the audience could see Patel's attempts at evasion. But the evidence was undeniable. Director Patel, Massie pressed. Given the documentation and the failures to act, are you prepared to accept responsibility for this negligence? Patel hesitated, then uttered the fateful words that would define the hearing. I don't know. The statement, simple yet profound, reverberated through the room. Cameras captured every subtle reaction. Committee members leaned forward. Journalists typed furiously, and the gallery understood the historical implications. For millions watching live, the FBI director's admission of ignorance symbolized a systemic failure at the highest levels of law. Enforcement? Massie then turned to the broader consequences. These failures have global implications, he stated. Financial markets, international relations, and public trust in the FBI have all been affected. How does the Bureau intend to restore accountability? Patel struggled, fumbling with prepared notes. But his attempts at explanation only reinforced the narrative of leadership failure. Each document, email, and recording presented by Massie highlighted deliberate oversight failures, ignored victim statements, and internal coordination to avoid scrutiny. Emily noted the subtle but important dynamic in the room. The evidence was presented with precision, yet Massie maintained calm authority. His approach was methodical, allowing each piece of proof to settle before introducing the next, leaving Patel little room for evasion. The audience, both in person and online, understood that this was not routine questioning. This was a historic moment in congressional oversight by the final minutes of the hearing. Patel's career trajectory was clear. The combination of naming high-profile clients, exposing ignored victim statements, and documenting the Bureau's failures created a scenario from which recovery was unlikely. Emily observed committee members exchanging brief, sober nods, acknowledging the weight of the evidence and the professional implications for the FBI. Director, the aftermath extended quickly beyond the hearing room. Global media picked up the revelations, highlighting the royal connections, the billionaires involved, and the failures to investigate credible victim reports. Analysts discussed potential legal consequences, international scrutiny, and institutional reform. The FBI's credibility faced unprecedented challenge. And Patel's resignation became inevitable. Massie's strategy had been deliberate and precise. By combining verified names documented in action and a systematic approach to questioning, he had dismantled the narrative of competence and control Patel had attempted to project. Emily reflected on the significance. The hearing demonstrated the power of preparation, evidence, and strategic questioning in holding even the highest-ranking officials accountable. As the cameras turned off and the gallery began to empty, the impact of the session lingered. Patel's career, meticulously built over years, had collapsed in 8 minutes. Bondi's absence did not lessen the historical weight of the exposure. The lesson was clear: transparency, accountability, and diligence are non-negotiable. And no one is immune when evidence and oversight intersect. For Emily and the broader public, the hearing underscored critical truths. Institutions rely on leadership that prioritizes justice and ethical responsibility. Negligence and evasion have consequences, and meticulous oversight, when paired with evidence, can alter the trajectory of careers and institutions alike. The story of this hearing, the unraveling of Patel's authority. The exposure of ignored victims and the meticulous work of Thomas Massie would remain a reference point in discussions about leadership, accountability, and the power of congressional oversight. History had been made, and the world was watching. The hearing concluded, but the ripple effects continued. Resignations, investigations, and global discourse ensued, cementing this session as a defining moment in law enforcement oversight and institutional accountability.